Sophie Mirabella, Annabelle's told the 100 or so protesters not allow themselves to be intimidated. I think it was about 100 to 1, wasn't it?
That must have reminded Albanese of some of his early years at Sussex Street, mustn't it?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. You know, as soon as he said that in Parliament last week or the week before, whenever it was, my mind is a little fuzzy on time, he said something like, "Oh, I see bigger protests. You know, I get more trots protesting outside my office every week than that of the convoy." And I thought, something tells me they'll be materialising somewhere near your address, and so it came to pass.
OK, David Marr, the breaking news is that the government has advice from the Solicitor General, and that advice is that any attempt at offshore processing now, including Nauru, would be problematical to the point where they won't pursue it.
Well, we'll have to wait to see the advice later today, but I'm astonished. The 4 judges who wrote the joint judgment in the case, this week's case, said quite clearly that Nauru was OK the last time, because although it was happening out on Nauru, the people who were actually dealing with the asylum seekers out there were all Australian officials, and that it remained in Australia's care, and we were responsible for them. And that looked to be laying down a law that you could send people off to, you know, boondock republics in the middle of nowhere, so long as we continued to look after them. If that's
the
surprising.
Case, Michael, then it looks a bit like they've got a bit of political cover here, but they're saying it's sound legal advice.
Well, I think the key thing for the government is, now out of all of this, is how do they stop the boats? Because that was the Howard refrain, and that'll be the Abbott refrain. So they've got to come up with something that says, we're going to stop the boats by these means.
Yeah, and it can't be Nauru, they say, because that leaves itself exposed to legal challenges.
So that's the question: is are they coming back to the true believers option, as some are urging them, to basically go back to a pre-Howard position, and we'll say, okay, we're going to not quite welcome the boats, but we're not going to do anything significant to
the
try
true
and
believers position. As Laura Tingle expressed it this way, she said, "Do what you said you were going to do all along as a nation, take them in, take care of them and stop vilifying them."
But Kevin Rudd also said he was going to turn back the boats. He said both. Labor said both things come, and that was the contradiction that is now this week blown apart.
Maybe this is a moment to reflect on the experience of countries that really receive lots and lots of refugee boats, and none of them are saying that their urgent national objective is to stop all the boats. I'm talking about Greece, Italy and Spain. They really get boats. And their politics isn't riven by the demand that all boats stop. We are in a very peculiar position. And the Minister said a moment ago that, once he announced Malaysia, the boat numbers dropped. In the 3 months before Malaysia was announced, the boat arrivals had already halved. And the notion that there is inevitably going to be, an invasion of boats like the Herald Sun had on its column, "Here they come." Well, look, there may be more boats coming. We can actually handle them. They aren't very large numbers. We can do it on shore. It's the cheapest, the legally most certain, and the most humane way to do it.
And the most politically fraught way of doing it.
The decision on unaccompanied minors, though, the decision on unaccompanied minors does provide an incentive for people to put their kids on boats, which is pretty scary.
And it provides an incentive for Australia to deal decently with these people.
I think the reality is that might be your political preference, and it might be, might be ours as well here. But the political reality is that a significant number of Australians want...
Michael, you don't have to persuade me of that.
Want, and both parties have gone to an election and will still maintain the position of, we need a policy that will stop the boats.
That's right.
That's the political reality. So
after 35 years...
So it's not a political option to say...
It's the political reality because it's been made the political reality. Right. I mean, it's a totally circular...
Annabelle, then, is there any room here? Do you think there is any prospect of the government negotiating with Tony Abbott on this and maybe coming up with a solution that involves Nauru?
Look, at the moment, this is it's not really back to the drawing board. It's, here's some bits of wood, build the drawing board and then get cracking. It's kind of all over the shop at the moment.
But
I wouldn't rule anything out.
This is not a deep... The thing about this is not a deep constitutional judgment we've had this week. This is just some High Court judges doing what lawyers do and carve it all up and argue this and argue that, endlessly. So it's not a constitutional thing. It's an interpretation of existing law. So it is, on the face of it, not that difficult for the law. It may be politically difficult, but it's not that difficult for the law to be changed to say, well, the minister can declare that that sending people, boat people to Nauru or Malaysia under these circumstances is permissible.
Well, and a bit of history here. I mean, that actual amendment is 10 years old. It was enacted in late 2001, post-Tampa, by the Howard government with support from the Beazley opposition. So that was a bipartisan section, you know, that was added to the Migration
Act. The
Act.
safeguards there, the safeguards that went into the law at that time were put in there by the Howard government with Beazley's backing. All that happened in the court this week was the government was completely surprised that the minister was answerable in the court for whether those safeguards were available in Malaysia. Now, I was there. I was in the court. I watched this unfold. It was so interesting because there was the Solicitor General of the Commonwealth having to admit to these judges that the Foreign Affairs advice on which the minister said Malaysia's a safe haven clearly said it's not a safe haven. But clearly said it was not a safe haven. The legal principle this week was whether or not the minister's decision could be reviewed by the court. Once it was reviewed by the court, it was a goner.